So this topic is particularly important for me because I grew up in a difficult home situation. And it's not because like my mom was a bad parent or anything, but it's in large because of environmental circumstances. And I grew up in Detroit, Michigan. I grew up in a lot of brokenness. And my mom was a single parent mom. So she raised my older brother and I by herself. And so as we were growing up, my mom was kind of trying to redo some things that she was correcting some things, some bad decisions that she made over time. And so my mom was raising us. She was going to school full time. She was working full time. And we didn't grow up church. We went some, but I don't think it's not because my mom didn't desire to take us to church. It's because she was just a tired mom. And I didn't grow up with a father in the home, though I had a relationship with my dad. And a lot of the father figures that was in my life were not godly figures. And so I learned a lot of bad habits. And so this is important to me because as youth leaders, as parents, we want to minister to the whole student. And so it's important for us to know what is going on in the lives of those students. And one, we have to be intentional about connecting with those students so that we can be able to minister, be in a good position to minister to the whole student. And so we can care for that student. And so this is why it's important for me because of lived experiences and also serving in an environment where there were a lot of challenges that students were navigating. And so, yes, that's why it's important.
Hi, I'm Liz, and man, you guys go praying. It was just coming to mind, the Lord makes beauty from mess. Like the scriptural theme of this, it is very true in my own life, and especially with my family life, popped into my mind. And it gives me so much hope, even sharing hope for our students that come to mind that are really struggling in their family lives, and they're stuck there at least until they're 18, is to remember the Lord loves to make beauty from mess. And so similarly, my home life growing up was just full of a lot of anger and a lot of pride. That was kind of the main things I remember. Aaron's fighting all the time. I would get in fights to kind of draw their attention away from them. And then for me, it was like a driven, try to get good academics and then athletics to get out, to just get a quality job. And young life became the church for me, became a safe place for me apart from chaos of my home. So the church being a safe place for students is a big passion of mine, of our line here. And can't besides, it's part of why we're here, that feel that even as a kid, because I was living it, surrounding it too, it was like, no, this is just reality, right? I don't really know how bad this is. I can remember other friends saying like, well, at least your parents aren't divorced. And you'd be like, it might be better. But it's supposed to be like better whether they're married and though they're tearing each other to pieces. I couldn't validate that myself. I just was like, I guess this is supposed to be fine, right? So the outside, having anyone else look at it and say, that sounds hard, was kind of transformative for me. And I did not find out until the second year out of college that part of that was an affair. My father decided all of middle school, high school, and college. It didn't come out for years later. So even the like sneaking around and things that were kind of confusing, but I would already accuse my dad with that. There was an underlying thing happening that I didn't even know until later that contributed to all of that. So just, even though people were like, oh, he's of course sitting out, like, there's a lot more. So that's a little part of my story.
This topic is something that's really close to my heart because when I was growing up, my parents, they really, instead of moving towards me when my emotions were really intense, I felt, this is my feeling, that I felt like they wanted to move away. And practically, or like, what that would look like is that, if I was upset and there was tears or whatever, they wouldn't, ask me a question. They would kind of just wait for my emotions, the storm of my emotions to blow over. And I got I really got the impression that they wanted to not hear me, they couldn't see me, and that they kind of wanted to turn their face away, right? And what that did to me, and this John, I'm going to say his name wrong, Aneshkala, what he said this morning in the session about kind of the data that we have, and then from that data, like coming to conclusions or building assumptions and worldviews from our experiences through analyzing that data. You know, of course, we wouldn't put it that way when we're little. We don't think of things and like I'm analyzing my life and coming to conclusions. But what that did, how my parents moved away from me in those times, what that did was that really, I think, messed with my view of God's fatherliness towards me. So I had a lot of trouble really understanding like God's posture towards me, his fatherliness, his welcoming of all of my all of my feelings and all that kind of thing. So I think this is somewhere that as people who work with youth, there are all kinds of issues that our kids or our students are going to come to us with, but when something like family or home life is challenging, that's sometimes not on the top of their list of like, oh, can you pray for me? You know, like Liz is saying, this is just your family. Like this is just who they are. Everything. We all know that our home lives are going to be unique, and so they might not think that this is actually affecting me in such huge ways. And until somebody actually puts eyes on it, to see that there's some need that is going unfulfilled, or some, that there's like a wound or a void there, it's just kind of left open. So that's why this topic is important to me.
Thank you. So I also grew up in a really chaotic, angry household. My parents were married, and they divorced, and then they remarried each other. If that just gives you any idea of the chaos. And there was alcoholism and other addictions and mental health issues and infidelity. And my brother and I kind of felt like we were hunkered down. Do have awesome brother. And my parents, they loved me. They loved me. And they were doing the best that they could with what they had. But that didn't mean that there wasn't a lot of collateral damage of what was going on. And I married a man whose parents had also been divorced, and very sort of traumatically. And we get all to that, so it was not going to be like that in our household. And then he died of cancer and passed away. And I became a single mom when my kids were 9, 12, and 13. So not to say that it was all hunky-dory before that, I'm sure it wasn't. But my dream of getting a do-over in my own family was definitely shy. And so I found myself leading a complicated home, a complicated family. So I feel really strongly about this topic, mainly because adults saw and helped me. And I know and believe in the power of what someone seeing you and hearing you and caring for you can't fix it, but boy, it can bring about a lot of feelings. You guys are in a position, so we wanna just help you walk alongside kids like who we were. So we want to define what we mean by a challenging home life, and there's a lot of ways to look at that. So we've got divorce, or mom or dad never being in the home at all, being a single parent family, but we've also got financial difficulties. We've got step families, blended families, a lot, and these can be real blessings too. It's not that all of this is necessarily bad. You can have something as seemingly normal as twins, and they have complicated feelings about each other, or being an only child, and the child really, would have liked to have had a sibling. Basically what we want to get across is if the child thinks that their family life is challenging, it's challenging. Everybody has challenges in their family, right? But if the child feels a particular stress in the home, then we want to validate that. And sometimes that can be hard, to validate this child coming to you and saying, well, it's really hard at home, and you're looking at it going, well, your mom and dad are pretty much perfect, and your siblings do this, and you do that, and everything's great, you know all your Bible verses, and what could be wrong in your house? So, yeah, Liz, I want to start with you. What makes it hard sometimes to validate that a child's having challenges at home?
Yeah, I love this question. What makes it hard to validate if they think it's hard? My mind goes to the 16-year-old who's has just had a breakup with her boyfriend and is devastated. And they've been dating for 2 whole months. Seriously. So the heart check, if that's hard for them, similar to a challenging home life, I need to do an internal heart check with what's going on in me. Because even for a challenging home life, if that's more in this vein and not the 2 months of dating, if there's something in me I haven't been able to validate myself, I'm not going to be able to validate it in this kid. And I think it can work both ways. It could either be, so say the kid in front of me is like, hey, my parents yell all the time. And I'm like, no, mine did too. I can be dismissive because it's something I survived and I haven't worked through it. And I haven't yet said to my younger self, that was really hard. Or it can be the opposite, just like Anna said, but it's so foreign to me, I have no idea what that's like, I don't know how to connect to that. But I do think if it's hard for us to validate an emotional experience, it often comes out with a story, we've got some work to do for ourselves to look into why that's difficult.
Isaiah,
Yes.
would you start us off with thinking about how we can establish trust with a student? And how we can offer an open door, how to talk about things at home.
Well, I think 2 things, and I mentioned it in my initial response, but I'm thinking of an interaction I had with a young lady that I was serving. And this young lady was a little hesitant to come and talk to me about something, but she was like, hey, Pastor, I need to talk to you about something. And so she pulled me to the side, and one of the things that she mentioned was that her mom had just been laid off, so her mom wasn't working, and they didn't have no food. And she felt, even though she was a little apprehensive and maybe felt a sense of shame about this, and that she felt like she had to be the one to solve the problem, and that, for whatever reason, she didn't feel like her mom could. She felt comfortable in coming to me and sharing that, which I was appreciative of. And then our church was able to meet the need. But I think 2 things. I think one is connection, is how are we showing up and connecting with the young people that we're serving? Not just, Wednesday night, we teaching them, during our programming, but how are we showing up in the lives of them, of the young people that we're serving and caring for them? So the connection brings care. And so when we connect with those young people, meeting them where they are and recognizing, some of the challenges that they're navigating, it allows us to care for them, care for the whole person. And I think that's how we establish trust, is by the connection that we make with each individual young person that we're serving. And that opens the door for us to be able to care. Even if it's not us directly meeting a need, but it's okay, they entrusted me with this information. Okay, how can I steward this? Are there resources that I can seek out to kind of help? And making sure that they're comfortable in me sharing this with whatever resource that I can have access to. So I think that's 2 ways that we can establish that open door policy, is being present, so connecting with the young people and me caring with them where they are.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Kwame, and I have been serving in youth ministry at Centennial Church in Forest Lake, Minnesota for more than 20 years. I'm also the author of More to the Story, Deep Answers to Real Questions on Attraction, Identity, and Relationships. And I've had the honor to write Rooted's new curriculum on biblical sexuality. It's a 9-week short study that goes through key passages in Scripture about the topic of human sexuality. And our hope and prayer with it is that it would help students to see why their sexuality matters so much and how they can honor God with their bodies and their relationships. We also hope and pray that it is a tool for you as you navigate the tough questions that our students are asking with gospel truth.
I think to add to that, Isaiah, too, you mentioned shame, and I think that that is such a something to keep an eye out for, because when we're trying to connect, shame is kind of what is going to keep somebody closed. So just a practical way to sort of get past that is when I am hearing someone else say, like, give a very non-reactive reaction to what I'm saying, like I feel such a relief that, hey, I'm safe to be able to say this and to admit this, and no one is like gasping like, oh, this is such a terrible thing, so I guess just on a practical note, like, to be aware of how you're reacting and receiving and stewarding that information that you're being given, yeah.
One thing that I will mention that I learned more as a widow than I did as a teenager, but when the person I'm speaking to is not trying to fix my problem and not trying to give me a list of here's the things you can do to feel better in grief, or whatever the circumstances brought to you, we're not trying to fix it and make it all better, because ultimately a lot of the things our students are dealing with, we can't fix it, right? And the solutions we offer may even just be absolutely all wrong for the situation. But when someone, like Connie said, just sort of accepts what they said, and doesn't judge it, and doesn't feel the need to comment on it beyond, wow, that sounds really hard. How do you feel? You sound sad. Whatever that it may be, just to sort of sit with them in it and not offer them 10 ways to make their lives better. That went a long way towards helping me trust other people with the painful things I was carrying.
Liz, would you have anything?
Yeah, I think that's so good. And I wrote the two biggest words for me, compassion and curiosity. How do we offer a compassionate, curious presence, which is thinking about Jesus, the incarnation of God with man. How do we be for and with our student, often withholding my need to fix and help and not have ideas, often with a soft posture, with eye contact, putting my phone aside, or even if they come to us choosing a corner of the room to take a kid into, because there's youth group going on, it's how do I actually create space and intentionality for them to have time and space to share. And I just started talking with my students explicitly about trust itself, because we live in an era with all sorts of information all the time, and trust should be built. I did not learn this as a kid with a body wrapping affair, so I didn't trust naturally. Trust should be built. It's lost, it can be broken, it can be rebuilt, absolutely. But even to get our kids wondering, like, how do I know what I can trust and who I can trust? I will tell my students, I'm going to earn your trust. I don't expect or even want you to trust me initially. I want you to feel that out. And there are at least 3 ways I think we build trust, looking for it. Thinking about, is this person for me? Can I really tell if they're for me or are they trying to use me for something? Like, are they for me? 2, is their integrity? Do they do what they say they're going to do? So there's a matchup of like, even meeting with boundaries. My youth leader says I'm going to be here at this time. They are. We end at this time. They keep my confidence. So integrity would be the second. And the third is a transparency or a vulnerability for us. If someone is purely just kind of taking your information from you and not actually offering in a way that's healthy and good, and we could talk about that for a long time. We don't want to use our students to process our own stuff, but we might want to be vulnerable if we've already talked about something with a friend, and we have our own emotional support here, then to offer a piece of our story that's willing to process, and maybe we've seen some redemption in, is something like an addiction even, or so for me, my family life. Now that I've had time to process, and grieve and see the Lord work through some of my family strife, I can offer to them pieces of that story. They're vulnerable, but I've seen God work. I'm not using them to help them bear that. So I do think we want them actually earning trust. And the vulnerability, I'd say trust and vulnerability go together. Vulnerability is never forced, and we want them to learn that too. It is invited, so we are empowering them to tell us, no, I don't want to talk about it. We might ask this and be like, hey, you don't owe this to me. I would love to know, though, what it's like to live in your house. But we empower them to tell us no and to pay attention to what they need to create a sense of safety too. I've been in different small groups myself too, where vulnerability is like this big thing we talk about. It's great. When it's forced though, it's weird, it's awkward, and it's not vulnerability. So I feel passionate about we can set the table for it and invite it. You cannot force it. That's not vulnerability and it's not love.
What is and is not our responsibility with regard to a student's home life? When we go to the parents, and when do we go and get outside help with the student? And how do we advocate for teenagers? I'm going to lean on those who actually have worked with teenagers more than I to answer that question. But yeah, what is the responsibility of the youth minister with regard to disclosures they hear about students' home life?
I'll just say a little pre-thing first. Yep. Without actually answering that question. I think you guys are better equipped to answer that question than me. But without actually answering that question, I just wanted to say that when you're speaking with your student about their home life, I think to affirm that, I love, Anna, how you said, and my parents love me, and to if your student is saying like, this is happening, to not try to veer away from empathizing with them, or I shouldn't use that word, but try to veer away from kind of bandwagoning on the
Parent bashing.
Mm-hmm. Yes, the parent bashing is what it is. So, just affirm that, it is hard, to hold their pain and hear them and see them and be curious and compassionate, but to also say, yeah, like, I know you love your parents. I think that your student they don't want you to think that they don't love their parents, or that, their parents somehow don't love them, just to affirm that, yeah, I know you love your parents, and I know that they love you, and that, that this is hard, but we can still say that in before we answer that question, I guess, yeah.
I did want to say that most of you probably are in churches that have policies regarding this, and I think that would be one of the very first places that you could go, is what is my church's policy on these matters?
Yeah, I think that's the tension that we hold, is how do we keep their trust? How do we hold that trust? While at the same time, how will we show up for parents as well? One of the pillars is partnership with parents. And I can just remember on a Sunday morning talking to the group as a whole, the youth group as a whole, and we started talking about some like heart things, and sort of the theme that was coming up is a lot of the young people did not feel comfortable with talking to their parents about things that they were struggling with for various reasons. One is that they're not gonna hear me, they're gonna talk at me, they're gonna blow this thing up, and they're gonna make it a big deal. And you take all of that information, and periodically I would have these parent meetings. And so one of the things that I would do in that parent meeting is I would share like, hey, I was having a discussion with the students, not picking out particular students, but it's also you have to extend grace to the parents as well, because a lot of us parents are discouraged, we struggling in different ways, and it's like, hey, here is what in general students are saying. Now this is not an indictment against your parenting and all these, but here's how we can normalize hard discussions in our families. So I think that's one way that we can one, keep the trust of our young people, and then also show up for parents. But I mean, some of the things is like if there's suicidal, comments, suicidal, self-harm, harming somebody else, or if it's some adult harm, those are like you mandatory, you have to report those type of things. But if there's other things that they're navigating, and I think that's where the connection with the young person is important. Hey, would you mind if I talk to this person about this, because I think they may have a resource, they may be a resource that we need. So getting their confidence and allowing them to say no, empowering them to say no, but getting their input in how we can resolve the situation. Can I talk to your parent about this? Sometimes they say yes, sometimes they say no. And sometimes they bring it up because they want you to talk to their parents because they feel like they can't talk to their parents. And so, yes, but that's the tension that we hold as we serve young people. But we want to be good stewards of how the Lord is calling us to show up in the lives of those young people. And we want to uphold their trust, but we also want to partner with the parents as well. So.
That's so good. Know your child protection policy. Safety is always a trump card, no matter what. Like Isaiah said, if there's a risk of them harming themselves or someone else, like that's you have to go to parent. And then the question is how to best care with a student. And I'm thinking about a student I work with who is self-harming. So she disclosed cutting herself. We had a long conversation of like, hey, so do you want to be the one to share this with your mom, or would you like me to go with you? So that's empowering her. If you don't, I'm going to give you some time, but then I'm going to share it with your mom. So that that's not an emergency situation. It wasn't suicidal self-harm. But there's a way to come alongside. She decided she wanted me with her in the room while she shared with her mom. If it's something like suicidality and you don't feel comfortable to evaluate, either which way, you're going to disclose that. It could be another like, do you want to share this? Do you want me to share this on my own, or we do it together? We got those options. Sexuality is another one. So I'm thinking of sitting with a 16-year-old girl who come out sexually active. So my partner and I, her high school, we were leading their high school girls' photo. We did a lot of praying about the timing of this to find when we be with her individually, have the conversation, and then empower her to say, we're glad to talk with you with your parents, or you can share, and then let us know. And so she chose to share with her parents on her own. We don't want to be a secret keeper, but we want to be holding in confidence, and that takes wisdom and discernment. And then also, we don't want to be a go-between for parents. Sometimes a parent will expect us to report on their child, and think early on, kind of like Isaiah said, in communicating, we want to partner with parents, so you can also communicate. I don't think the best way to actually love your student is to be a go-between, to like expect that I'm going to report on your student. That actually breaks trust. That's not helpful for anyone. You kind of establish that boundary early if possible. I'm here to partner in ministry with you, but not to, like, I just am thinking of a situation with a divorce in a former church where there's expectation, like you should be telling me everything my child is doing, what they've said to you, and that's not reasonable nor wise. So.
I want to piggyback on that. Just as a parent, I began to realize as my kids moved into their mid and late teenage years, and I say this with regard to not the very most serious things like self-harm and that, but as a parent, I don't need to know everything. There's a point at which if they are talking to another trusted adult who loves the Lord, and it's okay. They're going to grow into adulthood and have lots of confidants who are not me. And I need to trust the Lord with that. I need to trust the other person with that. If it is not talking about these really big, serious, life-threatening things, but if it's a breakup after 2 months and they don't want to talk to me, I'm just thanking God that they're talking to Liz. I mean, for real, it is okay for them to begin to move out from under parent doing absolutely everything. It's just really hard for the mom and dad. It's so hard. But it's gross for us, just like it's gross for them.
Do you remember what it felt like to be a little kid at Christmas time? There's nothing quite like the anticipation of Christmas morning. But the holiday can lose its wonder as we wake up to the many hard things going on in our lives and in the world. The loss we feel over our childhood experience points to a deeper longing inside all of us, for everything sad to be undone and for us to live together with God in perfect joy. This fall, Rooted is releasing a new Advent devotional for teenagers with New Growth Press called Longing for Christmas. We look at 25 promises God made and fulfilled in the coming of Jesus. As we explore the way God has kept his promises, teenagers will be encouraged that all of the longing they feel for a better world and for things to be made right will be fully met in Jesus Christ.
This is an incredibly hard question for me personally to figure out. What does it mean to honor your mother and father? What does that look like, and how do we teach teenagers to obey that command faithfully? It's a command. It is very important. God takes it very seriously. While we're also inviting out whatever hurt they're experiencing, sometimes directly from their mother and father, to receive some healing. This is a balance that a lot of you are walking.
So I had a student who was sharing how he has a single mom, and it was it's one of those hard situations where he lost his dad a long time ago, and the mom, she had all manner of medical issues, and she was anxious and even bipolar and all these things, and he really felt like he was responsible for the family, right, as you do as the oldest son. And so she had this one wish, which was for him to take a certain career path. And he just expressed how this is not what I want to do. And that was something that was really just eating away at him, because he really wants to please his mom, who he loves so very much. And this is kind of a situation where, there is that question of honoring your parents. Like, what does that really mean, right? And I'll say that honoring your parents does not mean like pure compliance all the time, because you don't honor by calling something not good. Sorry, there's better words for this, and I'm sure you guys have, but I think you guys know what I mean is that it's not honoring to label something good when it's not good or unhealthy, right? So that's half my answer, is that honoring your parents is not compliance all the time.
Do you think it would be fair to say that honesty is more honoring?
Yes. It's a good word.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
That's really hard to do when there are expectations, and parents just naturally have expectations to their children. It's just, it's just part of the deal. When they're born, you're like, okay, I got this one figured out. Here's the path. And it's really hard to let them go. But ultimately, I really do want my child to tell me what God has ordained his life to look like, not fitting into my mold.
Yeah, this question is something we wrestle with quite a bit in my counseling program in our training, and asking, so I'm taking it in the more severe cases, I think, of abuse and of addiction in families. And for me, my father has a personality disorder. In situations like that, those more extreme, where we're surviving, especially in childhood, and often a kid is protecting, like I want to protect the reputations of their parents, I want to take care of them, and this is a part of surviving. We are not yet able to live in the light. So just living in the light, I'm thinking of searching and knowing you, Lord. All of us are learning to live in the reality of the kingdom, to be able to call what is good, good, to be able to call what is wrong, wrong. And I think there's a way of inviting students to live in the light that also says, my parent is an image bearer, here's the brokenness. I am an image bearer, here's the brokenness. The tension of dignity and gravity comes to mind for this. And for even to say personality disorder, how am I using this category? I was just telling my story to a group of young adults a couple weeks ago, and I threw out, like, yeah, my dad has narcissistic personality disorder, and I realized I used a shorthand and a label in a way that's not necessarily honoring to him. How and why am I using this label? If I can describe my experience of having a man one-up me every time I shared a story, or dismiss what I was saying to tell a story that was impressive, you're going to get a better feel for some of the pain actually in my life. But for me to say personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder, I kind of dehumanize it and stick him here. I mean, I love my dad. He's not a trustworthy man, but how I live in the light was something that's been extremely shaping and painful and continues to be an unfinished place. I think it's got to be with owning that, paying attention to my own temptation to self-protect and to dehumanize, and also to say, like, but this is still a place I need care and I need the body to bear with me because it's really painful.
I think there are things that I'm trying to unlearn, I think. And I think culturally, like, I grew up in an environment where compliance was required and it was demanded in a lot of ways. Where as a young person, you feel like you don't have a voice. You only talk when somebody's talking to you. Young people are to be seen and not heard. You know, do as I say, not as I do. All these things that was reinforced when I was young, culturally, in a lot of ways. So in other words, I was taught to be passive, but then as an adult male, I'm told that adult males are not to be passive. But this is what I learned. But I think, yeah, there's a tension where I try to think as an adult and as a parent, how do I empower my kids, my children, to know that their voice is important and how to use that voice? And so I think as a youth pastor, that's why not only connecting and caring for the young people we're serving, but that's why relationship with parents is so important. Because one of the things when I mentioned that story about what the students were saying and what I was communicating, and one of the things that I found to be a challenge but an opportunity, which is what I mentioned to the parents, is like, how can we normalize having difficult conversations with our young people? So sometimes honoring our parents is telling the truth in love. Like, Mom, Dad, you hurt me when you said this. And then on the flip side is that how can we come alongside of parents to help them receive that well and not get defensive? So me as a parent, if I'm hearing that from my child, how can I not get defensive but receive what they're communicating to me? And I think that's where the relationship with the parents are important, and that relationship with the young person is important as well. And so one of the things that I used to try to do is like communicate to the young people that I serve how important their voice was, how important it was to speak up when they feel like something is wrong, but there's an injustice or different things like that. And I think sometimes honoring our parents is telling the truth in love. We also have to be mindful of how we communicate these things. But that's, again, I'm, as an adult, trying to unlearn some things that was taught to me as a young person. But I'm trying to do it in real time. I'm trying to do it just like, some childhood trauma that I went through, and trying to learn how do I manage and regulate my own emotions, and then teach my kids how to manage and regulate their emotions. We trying to do this thing at the same time. And so I think that's a very real, struggle and challenge that I have, but it's also an opportunity, because I think young people need to know how much that their voice matters and how important it is, not only to me, but also to the church, because the church needs to hear from you as well. So it's good.
I love that. It is so important that kids know that their experience is validated. And I want to leave a little time for Q&A, but each one of us is going to sort of leave you with a parting thought. And I alluded to my parting thought earlier, but it was that you really can make a difference in the lives of the teenagers. I know that's why you're in the work that you're in, but I want to affirm that you really can make a difference in the lives of the teenagers that you're working with, and you can make a difference in the lives of their parents as well. The youth pastor that my older two kids had was a tremendous support to me because I felt his open door. I didn't go to him often, but I went to him a couple of times, and he also just listened, and he validated the fear and the worry that I had for my kids, and I had confidence that this young man who I honored so much had an eye on my kids, and that was just some real comfort to me that there was somebody else who loved my kids and was asking them to shoot baskets or watch Nuggets basketball, whatever he got to. What you're doing really matters.
What I'll say is that when you have your eye on something about your student that possibly you could be the only one to have an eye on, because sometimes, the student might not, this is not on the top of their pray for me list, or this is not the issue that they're sharing about with their friends. But when you have your eye on that, I mean, as a parent, I say, that's wonderful. Like if that was, my kid and somebody had their eye on it and was supporting them and just saying, I'm gonna pray for you in this, I think that just makes such a world of difference. And for me personally, relating it back to my story of how, my parents, the way they parented me, having a real effect on how I saw God's fatherliness towards me, I think that area was such a conduit for the gospel. Had somebody, it came to me later on in life, but I think it's just such a, it's almost like the IV is there, that the opportunity is like that IV, and the flush is like the gospel that needs to go into it, and you guys are the people in your eyes on it, then that's just an opportunity for that.
I remember when I was about 11 or 12 years old, I was doing something that I did all the time. I was walking to the corner store to get some candy, probably some Now Layers because that was my favorite type of candy. But I was walking to the store to get some candy, and this was in broad daylight. And as I walked closer to the store, all of a sudden I hear these gunshots. And so I hide behind a car, and the store was across the street from a precinct, so I see these police officers run across the street, and they chasing somebody, and then I just turn around I'll just go to the store later. And then it was just business as usual. Now, this might seem like a very extreme story, but the reality is that a lot of our young people that we're serving live in extremes. They live, just like I did, in a constant fight or flight. And I think that's why it's important that we foster an environment where young people can be seen, where young people feel heard, and that's why I go back to those two things. Connection, how we connect with, it's important for us to connect with the young people that we're serving, because oftentimes they are going through a lot of things, but they're going through it in isolation, in silence, experiencing loneliness. And so connecting with young people, showing up for those young people are important, because some of them often live in extremes. Caring for those young people, even if it means just showing up and just listening to them vent about something, about breaking up with a boyfriend or girlfriend after 2 months. But just showing up and caring for those young people, but they want to be seen, fostering that community where they have a sense of belonging, where they can be seen and heard is important.
That's so good. And that really was sort of my parting thing too, just to piggyback, would be the importance of validating and acknowledging the emotional experience our student is having is it's just so important. And there's a difference between validating the emotional experience they're having is real and valid, and their narrative about it. So like, hey, my mom's crazy, the house is just terrible. Like, we don't have to validate the narrative, but we can say, man, it sounds really hard. What is that like for you? We can go for the heart, right? So validating the heart, they are experiencing distress or numbness or whatever it is different than validating their narrative about it. But we need to do the work of validating their emotional experience and seeing them. And then we do that for ourselves too, which is hard. And the other thing I'd say is that the kids who most need this are probably not sharing with us. Like, you may have a kid who comes in and dumps everything on you, but more often than not, these questions, so actually, if your gut tells you, that kid's really, really quiet all the time in a way that doesn't quite feel right, that's part of why I wrote them up. Go for it. Be curious, be kind, compassionate, but like, those kids probably need to be drawn out with a question that's like, hey, tell me what's 2 words of what it's like to be in your house. And you might get a little bit more from that. So really listen to your gut, because the kids that probably most need it aren't going to give you a lot of signs. So it's about kind of like Isaiah said.